Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shamanic and Alchemical Mystery School Global Gathering. We are living in a truly momentous time. We find our lives filled with unexpected changes, new awakenings, and initiations on both a personal and a collective level. Especially during times like these, it is of vital importance that all humans have access to receive and remember the ancient teachings about the power and abilities that are our birthright, the sacredness of life itself, and the vital support streaming in from the unseen realms to guide and support us on this journey of awakening. The Shamanic and Alchemical Mystery School Global Gathering is a very special event designed to guide you in connecting with your own profound power within, so you can feel liberated to confidently make the changes you most deeply need and rise into living your fullest life during this unprecedented time on our beautiful planet. I am Jocelyn Starfeather. I'm the founder of Sacred Planet, and I'll be your host and guide for this event. And today I am delighted to be here with Ani Williams. Hi, Ani. Welcome to our gathering.
Hi, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, it is a pleasure to be here with you. And we were last together in Egypt in February 2022. So it's just wonderful to share space with you again. Yes. So let me share a little bit more about your work, Ani, so that everybody can learn about your brilliant work and your amazing book that's coming out. So Ani Williams is a harpist, singer, author, and sound therapist. She has performed worldwide since the 1980s and has recorded more than 24 albums of original music based on ancient sacred traditions. She has done seminal research in sound healing and the relationship between musical tones, the human voice, and healing. For more than 3 decades, Ani has presented concerts, seminars, and trainings in Europe, Britain, Mexico, and the United States, and her popular Sound Alchemy bioacoustic training courses are now online. Ani's debut book and CD release, called Guardians of the Dragon Path, is already receiving rave reviews and is officially available November 28th, 2023. Very exciting. The book is a mystical quest down the Paris Meridian, revealing an ancient dragon path marked by standing stones, temples of Egyptian and Greek gods and goddesses, and forgotten sanctuaries of Maria Magdalena. Guardians of the Dragon Path is a stunning mix of extensive scholarly research, travel memoir, and otherworldly encounters, a book that will challenge your understanding of the history of our world. So, Ani, this is just wonderful, and it's so exciting that your book is going to be available just before our event here begins. So I encourage everybody to go out and find your book and buy it and enjoy it. It just sounds so amazing. So your topic for our interview today is sound alchemy and the mystical traditions of Egypt in Spain. So this is a fascinating topic. Thank you for bringing it to us. And I would love to begin just by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about your journey into doing this powerful work. What led you here?
I think I was grabbed and put on the path. I really, had so many different messages in dreams and experiences where, for instance, my first harp was a gift. My first guitar was a gift. Everything was just coming at me saying, do this, and I was a bit reluctant. But I eventually got pushed on the path of the mystical traditions of the world, the Eastern traditions, indigenous traditions. And as soon as I started actually playing the harp, I received invitations to go to various places. I had not traveled internationally, but starting in 1985, they saw my harp and it was small enough to travel with. So they said, oh, well, come on our journey to Egypt, or come to South America, or come to Great Britain and play. All you have to do is play your music and you have a free journey. So that got me out there. And, experiencing various cultural traditions and how they use sound to create altered states of consciousness, healing, communion, and unity. etc. So that really put me on the path of what has led me here.
Wow, what a beautiful journey. It sounds like the universe was just opening the doors for you all along the way. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yes. So can you tell us then, what is sound alchemy?
Yeah, it's many things to many people. I mean, sound is such a big thing right now, and it's important that it is. But for me, if you look at traditional alchemy, alchemists would use, for instance, sulfur, mercury, and salt in the process of transforming lead into gold, or creating the possible human, the transformation. And sometimes that was related as the perfect unification of the male and female qualities in us, called the hermaphrodite, or the blend of Hermes and Aphrodite. So that idea of unification of the being, perfect balance to create something greater, to create a greater awareness in us. So instead of using sulfur, salt, and mercury, we use sound. And I think, when I was reflecting about our talk today, I realized that what I'm doing is bridging a gap between science and the generic application of sound for healing, because there are a lot of modalities in the, available these days. And many of them are beautiful. I mean, you can be totally transported with just the sound of a healing instrument, or the sounds of nature, or the sound of a didgeridoo, the Australian instrument. So all of that is good. And you can have an instantaneous high, or a beautiful experience, or like the shamanic traditions using sound, chanting, drumming, etc., to go into altered states, and that can happen immediately. But what I'm doing is a little different. I'm combining those traditions and finding specific tones for each person. We're not generic people. We don't all need the same things. So I was trained many, many years ago, decades ago, in voice diagnostics. And it's interesting because all of these years, I think it's 3 decades, I would say what I was doing, voice analysis, and they'd say, what in the world is that? And it's actually something that the Hermetic traditions, in the teachings of Hermes, they speak about sound, they speak about the universal sounds and the universal truth, and the planets and the stars, and the importance of understanding all of that science. So it was based on the Egyptian and the Babylonian sciences that combined the cosmos and understanding astronomy and astrology, combining that with sound and mysticism and evolution, and putting it together. So basically what I'm doing is combining a scientific modality of discovering what sounds are in each person, what the symphony in each person is. And you find that by using something called voice diagnostics, just analyzing the patterns in the human voice, and it tells a story. And what's really kind of fun is this, we're talking about bridging all kinds of things. And the Wall Street Journal a few years ago had a beautiful article. What does your voice tell about you? And they were going through all of the different ways that voice diagnostics is used today for identification, security systems, very different way of looking at it. For hiring, corporate hiring, to see what the character of a person is and what their potential is. It's all in the voice. So I really was quite excited that,
Really fascinating. Yeah.
Things like the Wall Street Journal were really getting on the bandwagon of sound therapy.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is so interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that the voice analysis was being used in those ways too. I think it's so interesting, and clearly you were way ahead of a lot of this wave that's happening now. There are so many opportunities for sound healing, courses online about using sound in different ways, these solfeggio frequencies now that we hear about all the time. There are all these different, modalities coming through, or ways of using sound for healing and different purposes. So that's fascinating that even like corporate, or mainstream is using it in different ways.
Right.
And yeah, clearly you've been ahead of the curve on all this. And so really beautiful what you're bringing here.
Well, it's really fun because people assume that this sort of thing is new age, but it's actually ancient age, really old age.
Thousands of years ago. Yeah.
A lot of the way I work is based on a lot of the Sufi traditions, which were a combination of the Egyptian sound traditions and mystical traditions, the Eastern Babylonian traditions, etc. And the Sufis were one of the most interesting cultures for looking at how they looked at the voice. And the great teacher Hazrat Inayat Khan said that the voice is a barometer that tells how the state of the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of that individual are. They could read it in the voice. So that's what I'm actually using a machine to do that, but it's the same principle. And then the idea is we want to set people free. It's a way of liberation because most people are not using all of the potential frequencies that are available. For instance, I could show you a graphic, but I didn't think to bring it. But, if you look at all the musical tones in the musical scale as a wheel, well, half of that is missing in most voices. So half of the potentiality is like using a portion of the brain,
That's so fascinating, right? Or like only a portion of the sky, of the whole arc of the sky, right?
Right.
I always think astronomically and astrologically about things.
Exactly. And actually, I should mention it's too big a subject to spend the whole time on, but like the Hermetic traditions, I combine the astrology with the voice analysis, because what is extraordinary, and I still have a hard time believing it, but it's been 30 years now, I should probably know that there is something going on here. But basically what happens is at the moment of birth, there's a blueprint of frequencies created by the heavenly bodies, sun, moon, planets, etc. And that blueprint is overlighting the soul when they're born. And it creates like a symphony of frequencies because all of those heavenly bodies are emitting frequencies. And now finally we have the Voyager series, etc., that you can hear all the recordings on the NASA website. So, it's that bridging of science and mystical traditions. And so that pattern, that blueprint at birth, you can actually read it in the voice. And it's not just about the voice, it's a pattern that the brain is making that we're able to read in the hearing ability, the speaking voice, the eye's ability to see certain frequencies. It's all programmed. That blueprint is programmed in the brain and then affects all of the rest of the functions.
Wow. And so when somebody's working with you and learning about their own voice and what that is saying about them, then are there ways to expand it and be able to use the whole
Absolutely.
cosmos?
the best question ever, and that's the whole reason for doing it. Yeah, so say for instance, if a person's missing EFG in their voice, and voila, they were born under the sign of Scorpio, which is related to the tone G. It's a long story, but basically you get them using those tones. I developed a series of recordings we'll mention later as their gift. And they start toning the tones that they're missing to stimulate the brain and stimulate the system to start recognizing those frequencies, and then they come back. So the idea is having that full spectrum of tonality. And I do still work with some private clients. I've been doing it for so long. I'm beyond retirement age, so that's why I'm training people online to do this, what I've been doing.
So you have a facilitator training as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on my website, and I'm training people. It's 37 modules of how to do this work, and going into the science, but also the practical, what can happen to a person when they start using the sounds that are missing in their life. Usually when I'm doing an analysis, I just have the person talk, and they will say, oh, I've always wanted to be a dancer, but my dad thought I should be a doctor, or all of these different stories. I always wanted to do this, or I feel this deeply, but I haven't been able to. Well, what the sounds, the missing sounds will come up when they start speaking about what their wishes are, what their dreams are. So the dreams and wishes and how to manifest those are absolutely connected with the frequencies.
Fascinating. Yes. Wow. And it makes total sense, right? It's like, oh, of course, yes, that those frequencies are lacking, and that's why then those abilities are not so easy to manifest, but we can work with that and shift it. Oh, wow.
When they came out with string theory, I was so excited because, they've gone beyond that now, but everything has a frequency. So if we know what frequencies we need, and that's the thing about the whole sound therapy world these days. We need to know what sounds we need. It's not a generic one size fits all. And then we need to know how to apply them ourselves.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
With us. It's really, really incredibly beautiful. Now, I know you're very passionate about this topic that's at the core of your interview. So can you tell us about what did you find in Spain as far as the Hermetic traditions of Egypt?
Yes, it's been about an 18-year journey. And I moved to France around that time. And I started going to Catalonia and different parts of Spain. It's just across the Pyrenees from where I live. So I started discovering that there are a lot of traditions from Egypt that came into Spain very early on. I can give what we know historically for sure, but there are indications because Egyptian temples were established along the coast of Spain, as well as, all around the Mediterranean. But Spain was the furthest west, for the Levant or the Eastern Mediterranean. Spain was like the other worlds, but I've discovered some historic references to the Egyptians coming 2000 BC, 2500 BC, because Spain had the silver, and the Egyptians needed the silver to create electrum, which is a combination of gold and silver for their statuary, to make it look alive. So when the initiate or the person would enter the temple, they would feel like the deity was alive. So they needed the silver. So they were coming to Spain for that, because there's a silver route right through Spain. But the mystical traditions came as well, and a lot of the later, around between 600 and 800 BC, the Greeks and Egyptians started coming to establish temples along the coast of Spain. And I've been focusing on the Catalonia section, which is northeast Spain, which is close to me. But basically, the hot spots for Hermetic medicine and the mystical traditions were in Alexandria, because that was kind of the hub for the trade of all these different cultures that were gathering in northern Egypt, and the Isle of Rhodes. And there was a tradition called the Ophite tradition, which is a word that is related to serpent, as you probably know. And so the Ophite traditions were practicing medicine and mysticism, and it became kind of merged in the later years with Pythagorean and Orpheus, traditions of sound and healing. So I started visiting those sites and learning more and more about what was discovered in those sites. They had temples of healing. There is a place where I'm going tomorrow and filming. I'm creating a series of videos and recordings of the various temple sites, so that when people read the book, they can discover, what was at these sites and what went on and what were the traditions. And the serpent, I named the book the Dragon Path, because it's an energy path, the telluric currents that move across the Pyrenees, but also they go every which way, they're all over the planet. But I found particular dragon paths and then dragon traditions of these cultures that came out of the East and brought their healing traditions. And they even named a lot of the sites in Spain Ophiusa. There are at least 3 sites named Ophiusa. And so then I was just doing a lot of research on Menorca. And I don't know if you're aware, but the T-shaped standing stones at Göbekli Tepe and Karhan Tepe. My friend Andrew Collins has written a couple of really excellent books on that, and he has another one coming out on Karhan. Anyway, we were dialoguing a lot before I went to Menorca, and these T-shaped standing stones are identical to Göbekli Tepe T-shaped stones. So the cultures were making a lot of exchanges. And a lot of people don't think about Spain or Menorca as places for these ancient traditions, but absolutely they were. In fact, at one of the big Taula T-shaped standing stones, they discovered a statue that was brought from Egypt of Imhotep, the great god of medicine.
Oh, wow.
So, and then there were implements that were showing that they were practicing very advanced medicine at the site. So, I found many traditions. There was another one that is quite exciting, because I just finished a video and a recording of a song about that tradition. Isis and Nephthys, the 2 sisters, the wives of, the Set and Osiris. So the great four, and how Isis and Nephthys worked together in the temples. It exhibits how they worked together for the Osirian mysteries, the raising of and the resurrection of the god. And so I found a ritual that is still continuing today in Murcia. It's along the coast of Spain. And they took the lamentations of Isis and Nephthys for the inundation of the Nile. Their tears created the flooding of the Nile. And they took the same idea and just superimposed 2 Marys for the rituals that they do every summer.
Wow.
And so, you know, these traditions, and there is it's a long story, but I just think it's fantastic how they have taken the two sisters, you know, Isis and Nephthys, and created them into the two Marys that came ashore. You know, the boat idea coming ashore. It wasn't just to Provence, it was in Spain as well. So lots of traditions, the music, the melding of the musical traditions are very strong, showing an Eastern Egyptian and Middle Eastern influence in Spain. There are so many examples.
This is so incredible. You know, I've heard, of course, we know that, you know, Egypt, Greece had easy access to Egypt and learned so much from them and incorporated so much of the Egyptian culture. And I've heard some researchers speak about the connection between Egypt and the, you know, Scotland, England, and Ireland, that area. But I haven't heard about this with Spain. This is so fascinating.
Well, the Egyptian connection, you know, there's the story about Skota, the Egyptian princess that had to leave, I think it was around 1500 BC. And she came purportedly, according to legend, first to Iberia, to the mouth of the Ebro River, not far south of Barcelona today, and then continued north to Ireland and Scotland. That's in the Scots Chronicles. So there are many stories like that. But it was a progression, and there was, of course, the tin trade in Cornwall. We had the tin trade in Spain as well as silver. So many migrations that most mainstream history doesn't really talk about.
Yeah, exactly. You can't find these things in the history books. And that's really fascinating about the T-shaped pillars that are similar to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And do you think they're of the same age? Because Göbekli Tepe is
No
years old.
No, they're later, but and in my dialogues with Andrew Collins, he put me in touch with a particular article of a Turkish researcher who really believes that there was a migration across, you know, through the maybe Malta, Cyprus, etc., onto the Spanish islands. And these traditions were brought into the West, but they're definitely dated much later in Spain.
Right. But yeah, that's
it's so the same tradition, though. It's so interesting.
Yes. Wow. So could you also tell us about the Camino de Santiago and what you found there about the ancient traditions and initiation?
Yeah, that is very interesting, because I think especially today we're seeing a revival of the Camino. A lot of talk about it. People are searching, as you know, for meaning. The nature of pilgrimage is to come back into our own center of discovery of who we truly are and the things that we've forgotten. And it's an initiatic path. And what I discovered in my research and getting to know some of the people in Spain that have been working with the Camino for a very long time, I was very excited to discover it's definitely pre-Christian, that it goes back a good 6,000 years. There's an astronomer, a German astronomer. He writes in German, but if anybody reads German out there, Heinz Comiskey, and he wrote a beautiful book on the star paths. And he was able to verify that the Camino, which we call locally the Way of the Stars, it's the Compostela, which is Field of Stars. And yet it was the Way of the Stars 6,000 years ago. And there were megalithic sites established at the same time that mark the Camino. Yeah. And on the east-west path of the Camino, it actually started at Captacreus, or in the region. That's the most easterly part of Spain. And it's just close to us. It jets out into the Mediterranean. And they would depart there in the time of the megalithic cultures, 6000 BC. But people actually lived there at the same site 17,000 years ago. So we're talking, older and older and older, and, it's just beyond our comprehension, really. And then we go to the people who were living in the Pyrenees in the Magdalenian era, 12,000 years ago, and 30 to 35,000 years ago, and painting on the walls and going into shamanic. They were using sound. There's a beautiful image at the grotto of the three brothers, Trois Frères, near where I live in the Ariège, and it shows a shaman with the body of like a buffalo or a bull or something, and horns, but he's playing a flute. And, they were entering altered states. We don't know how they were doing it, but definitely sound in those grottos with the reverberations would put people in an altered state. So we had those layers and layers. But to get back to the Camino, it's that kind of an area along the Pyrenees range, those layers of time. But the Camino it went through stages of time. So there was the older Camino, and then we had the Greek era, from about 800 to 200 BC, when they were really flying high as trade centers. They started using the same routes. And I don't know if they were using it as an initiation path or not. There isn't any verified information, but very interesting legend. So Captacreus is the easternmost point of Spain. It's right by the border of France and Spain, the eastern end of the Pyrenees. So there it used to be called the promontory of Aphrodite. That was the official name. And there was a temple of Venus Aphrodite that is well known. And we also have at the same place the legend of Orpheus getting shipwrecked, being shipwrecked on the rocks there. Then he apparently was coming with Jason and the Argonauts looking for the golden fleece in the Pyrenees somehow. And he was shipwrecked, and he was clinging for dear life to a rock, as the legend goes. He grabbed his lyre and began strumming this new song because he was so enchanted by the beauty of the landscape and how the Pyrenees rose out of the Mediterranean. It was just so dramatic and beautiful. He started playing to the mountains, and the mountains were so enchanted, they started moving toward Orpheus. And so it created a land bridge. And that's how they say the promontory was created. But anyway, having Orpheus at the eastern end of the Camino is no small thing. Aphrodite and Orpheus were both associated with the swan. Now, what's really interesting about the Camino, and this I learned from a Spanish architect who's been working with the Camino history for decades, it's related to the journey. The ugly duckling story? Well, it's the Camino is in 64 stages. And it relates to something called the Game of the Goose, which is an ancient medieval game, kind of like the chessboard in a way, but it's a game of evolution. And it's played by families still today. And in this game, the goose is transformed into a swan. So this whole idea of Aphrodite and Orpheus being at the eastern end of the Camino, and the idea of the initiate being transformed into something more beautiful, something more precious, something deeper.
Yeah.
Totally goes along with this idea of the transformation into a swan.
Yes.
And it also goes with, there are 64 stages in the Camino, means stopping points for prayers or whatever, evolutions. But it's also like a fractal journey across time and space, because 64 is also related to the cycles of Venus. And the Mayans and the Babylonians were using these sort of calendars. So every 8 years, Venus makes a beautiful pentagram in the heavens, the only planet that makes a perfect shape in the heavens like that. Stages 8 times 8, 64, the stages of the initiate on the path, and all of the legends and all of the traditions, and going back to the shamanic traditions in the Pyrenees, and the consciousness, the evolutionary ideas of people throughout time that have embedded in that path all of their traditions. And it's so rich because you have layer upon layer upon layer. And then the Christian tradition came, and most people, when they walk the Camino, they're thinking about St. James and Mary, the mother, But actually, during the medieval era, it was the Knights Templar and Mary Magdalene sites that also marked the Camino. So that's another thing that I discovered on this long journey.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So many connections there. And, I'm thinking of Andrew Collins, his book, The Cygnus Key, which is about
It's
the constellation of the swan, right? The Northern Cross or Cygnus, which so many of the ancient sacred sites, including some of the enclosures in Göbekli Tepe, are pointing straight at Cygnus, swan in the sky. Yeah.
He discovered also that actually the Giza pyramids are also aligned to Cygnus.
Right.
And I can see Cygnus from my place here in the winter. It's great. So yeah, I kind of propose that as a possibility. It's going to take more research, but there was the Southern Cross that people followed if they were going south, or the Northern Cross, which is Cygnus, or the Summer Triangle. And did they actually use? I mean, of course, we know they use the stars. It's called the Way of the Stars. And depending on what season and what time of day, you use different stars.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, this is so fascinating. And I'm sure that much of this is in your book, right? So we can read even more about it there. Yeah.
Right.
Amazing. I love that you've done this very extensive research in so many different places all around the world. It's so beautiful to hear about it.
I've been a bit of a mad woman hermit, and my friends are getting tired of it. When is she coming out to play?
Yeah, right. Well, I have just one more question for you, Ani, that I would love to hear your thoughts about. It's going back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which it related to the sky, but I wonder if you could just say a few words about how you've found that the ancient people in these many different cultures perceive the idea of the planets and the stars creating harmonics. You mentioned that is kind of part of what makes us who we are at the moment we're born. There's this certain harmonic resonance.
Yeah.
How did the ancient people work with that in their rituals?
Really good question. There are so many different systems. The Mayan number count, the numbers are called tones. And that gives us a clue as to how they looked at these things. I knew a Mayan shaman, and he said, we're working with one solar system here, but the Mayans work with I don't know if he said 9 or the systems, the wheels within wheels. So how they related it to sound. There are so many systems. There's the Chinese, there's the Vedic tradition, and they all have a little different way of looking at it. And I'm working in more the Western mystical tradition that came out of the Hermetic traditions originally, that then came into the Neoplatonic schools, like in Florence, Italy. And from there, because Cosimo Medici and family were collecting all these ancient texts from Greece, Egypt, Babylonia, all over. And they had like an amalgam of teachings about sound. And the way they looked at it is each planet was emitting its influence in general effects. Like Ficino said, every celestial body is affecting us, in inaudible ways, just as music does audibly. So the way I work with it is based similarly to how they were, and creating musical formulas based on a person's planetary pattern.
Yeah, amazing. It's so beautiful how you're pulling these ancient traditions forward to access them now.
There are many different traditions of how they related specific sounds to each planet. And, you can find many systems out there, but I always believe that if you find one that really works for you, use it, and always remember that it's not the only system out there. There are,
yes,
like wheels within wheels kind of idea.
Right. So many amazing lineages of wisdom. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ani. This is a powerful remembrance for us to connect with what you're sharing here. And I know that you have a beautiful free gift for us, which is called a sound therapy recording for the age of Aquarius. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's one of the 12 sound meditations that I developed as an application. So for instance, when I was doing the analysis, I wanted to have a way that they could focus on their missing tones or their key tones, their liberating tones. So I developed these 12 meditations on the musical scale, going through C, C sharp, and so forth. So this particular, and I call the system Songaya, or sound of the earth. Songaya, just meaning the earth and all of its natural sounds that can heal. So the recordings are 15 minutes long, and this particular one is on the tone A sharp. And so the A sharp relates to the sign of Aquarius in my system. And so in this era that we're in, the age of Aquarius, or on the brink of it, on the edge of it, Aquarius in the sound therapy is a tone that is used for nervous systems, electrical fields. Most of us are totally stressed on that regard. We spend too much time on our computers and, writing a book. I had to be, and, it's just, so it's a tone to soothe the nervous systems. It's a tone to de-stress. And there's a Tibetan mantra on it as well. And so everything is described. Each tone downloads, so they get a free download of a 15-minute A sharp meditation. It has a whole file of information that comes with it that explains a lot of what I'm talking about regarding the sound and planetary connections. And also the instruments on it are some of the oldest known instruments that are used in sound therapy, like the Australian didgeridoo, Tibetan bowls, whale song, harp, overtone chanting, etc. So that's all kind of coming together on the meditation.
Amazing, amazing. What a beautiful free gift.
Yeah.
And so I know you've provided a coupon code so people can go to your store and get that for free. So everybody listening, scroll down just a little bit below this video and you will see the link to click on and the coupon code to use so you can have that amazing meditation and the materials that come along with it for free. Wow. Thank you, Ani. That is so generous of you.
Well, may it bring peace on our planet if we, individually can de-stress and become more peaceful. Hopefully that will resonate out into the world and world leaders.
Yes, yes, this is how we can truly shift the resonance of the collective, right? Is by starting with each one of us individually. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for this time today, Ani. This has been just a fascinating conversation. I have about 10 more questions I would love to ask you, but we'll have to do another interview for that.
Okay.
So thank
I'd
you.
love
So
to.
much. It's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn.
Yeah, and to everybody out there listening, I hope you have enjoyed this conversation and be sure to join us for all of the other interviews that we'll be sharing with you soon. Much love, everybody.